Here is the translation into English, adapted to maintain the flow and tone of a video script or commentary. He was once one of the most powerful actors in K-dramas, a face that dominated magazine covers and popularity rankings, and whose presence in a drama guaranteed historic viewership ratings. But today, many people are asking the same question. What happened to Joong-ki? Has he been cancelled? Is he washed up? Or did he simply disappear without us noticing? And most importantly, is there still a future for him in K-dramas? Stay with me until the end of this video, because we are going to separate rumor from reality and understand if Joong-ki has really been left behind, or if he is preparing to come back stronger than ever. To understand why Joong-ki's recent trajectory sparks so many doubts, criticisms, and debates, it is fundamental to go back to the period when he seemed literally untouchable. There was a moment when his name didn't just generate curiosity, but conveyed an almost automatic sense of quality. If Joong-ki was involved in a project, the audience trusted it before even watching. The definitive turning point happened with Descendants of the Sun. This drama wasn't just a commercial success. It became a true cultural phenomenon, capable of redefining standards within the Korean industry. The character Yoo Si-jin embodied everything the audience idealized in a male lead: courage, charisma, lighthearted humor, intense romance, and a magnetic screen presence. Joong-ki ceased to be just a popular actor and came to be treated as a symbol of the golden age of K-dramas. From that moment on, his image exploded internationally. Brands fought for contracts, his presence at events became almost mandatory, and his popularity outside Korea grew impressively. He wasn't just loved by drama fans, but recognized even by those who didn't usually follow these productions. It was the peak in every sense: prestige, visibility, the power of choice, and respect from the industry. The most interesting part is that even at this level, Joong-ki didn't settle. He could have repeated the same type of romantic role indefinitely, living off past success. But he decided to take risks. He began to seek out characters that were more complex, less obvious, and emotionally colder, in a clear attempt to mature along with his career. This transition was consolidated with Vincenzo. There, the audience saw a completely different Joong-ki, a character far removed from the traditional hero, morally ambiguous, violent when necessary, and guided by self-interest, and yet charismatic. The success of the drama proved that he was capable of reinventing himself without losing relevance. For many fans, that was the moment he stopped being just a heartthrob and began to be seen as a complete actor. During this period, Joong-ki seemed to have reached the perfect balance. He didn't need to appear constantly to be remembered. His absence generated anticipation, and his return always became an event. There was an almost blind trust in his choices, as if every new project was strategically thought out. This was, without a doubt, the highest point of his trajectory, a moment when no one questioned his talent, his decisions, or his future. But as happens with many careers that reach the absolute top, the peak also marks the beginning of comparisons, and soon after, the first disappointments. After the absolute peak, Joong-ki's decline didn't happen due to a lack of opportunities, but precisely because of an excess of them, and due to missteps along the way. Unlike other actors who fade away due to a scarcity of offers, he remained active but began to get involved in projects that didn't resonate with the audience, and, in some cases, not even with the critics. One of the most cited examples is the movie Space Sweepers. Despite being sold as Korea's big bet on space sci-fi, the final result divided opinions. The film had international visibility, but many viewers considered the script shallow and emotionally distant. Joong-ki's acting wasn't seen as bad, but it wasn't memorable either. For an actor used to leading memorable productions, this sounded like a warning bell. Another case that generated frustration was Bogota, City of the Lost. The project suffered several delays, production problems, and planning changes. When it finally gained public attention, it already carried an aura of weariness. The film failed to create a real impact and ended up being remembered more for its complicated behind-the-scenes issues than for the content itself. For many fans, it was a waste of potential. There was also criticism regarding Hopeless, a heavier and darker film in which Joong-ki bet on a raw image, far from his usual glamour. Although the project received some recognition at festivals, the general public didn't connect with it. The feeling was that he was choosing works that were too artistically dense, but emotionally inaccessible to his fan base. These films, taken together, began to create a dangerous narrative that Joong-ki was consistently missing the mark. These weren't small or irrelevant projects. On the contrary, they were big, ambitious bets that failed to create empathy or lasting enthusiasm. And when this happens repeatedly, the actor's image begins to wear down. In dramas, the situation wasn't much different. After the resounding success of Vincenzo, any new work carried unrealistic expectations. When subsequent projects didn't reach the same level of impact, disappointment was inevitable. The audience began to question not only the scripts, but the very direction his career was taking. From that point on, Joong-ki began began to face something he had never dealt with before: collective doubt. Before, every new announcement was celebrated. Now, it came accompanied by suspicion. Will it work? Can he still carry a production on his own? This sequence of lukewarm projects didn't destroy his career, but it shook something fundamental: the certainty that he would always deliver something memorable. And in the world of entertainment, losing that aura of security is the first step toward a deeper fall. If professionally, Joong-ki was already facing questions, it was in his personal life that his public image underwent an even more profound change. For a long time, Joong-ki was seen as one of the most protected actors in the Korean industry. His public image was carefully constructed: professional, private, polite, and distant from major scandals. All of this began to change irreversibly, starting with a relationship that, ironically, was born from one of the most beloved dramas in history. The marriage to Song Hye-kyo turned fiction into reality and enchanted fans inside and outside Korea. The couple was treated like a modern fairy tale, two stars at their peak, united by a romantic story that seemed almost too perfect. For a while, they were the ultimate representation of the ideal sold by K-dramas: love, success, and destiny. But what seemed solid crumbled quickly. The divorce came unexpectedly, and worse yet, surrounded by rumors, strategic silences, and conflicting versions. Unlike other discreet separations in the industry, the end of the marriage was turbulent, raising speculation about internal conflicts, unilateral decisions, and deep emotional wear. The absence of clear explanations opened space for parallel narratives, and Joong-ki's flawless image began to crack. For many fans, that was the first real shock. The fantasy fell apart. The actor who seemed to live a perfect romance off-screen began to be seen as someone involved in a cold and non-transparent breakup. Even without direct accusations, the simple breaking of that idealized image was enough to alter public perception. As time passed, when it seemed the dust had settled, Joong-ki surprised everyone again by announcing a new relationship, this time with a foreign woman. The marriage quickly reignited intense debates. Part of the public supported him, but another part reacted with resistance, especially in Korea, where there is still a silent expectation that big stars maintain a traditional and predictable image. The situation gained even more traction when he became a father. Fatherhood, which normally brings celebrities closer to the public, ended up deepening the divide. Some came to see Joong-ki as a man who simply moved on with his life and found happiness outside the script fans had written for him. Others, however, felt he had strayed too far from the public figure that sustained his popularity. This sequence of events completely changed his relationship with the public. Joong-ki ceased to be just an admired actor and became a man constantly analyzed, judged, and compared to his past. His personal life stopped being invisible and began to directly influence how his work was received. In the end, it wasn't a classic scandal that shook his image, but rather a succession of personal choices that broke the perfect narrative built over years. And when the fantasy falls, not all fans can accept what remains. After so many highs, lows, and profound personal changes, the big question remaining is simple, yet powerful. What can we really expect from Joong-ki from now on? 2026 emerges as a symbolic year, not just because of the length of his career, but because of the stage of life he is in. He is no longer the young heartthrob molded for idealized romances, but he is also far from being a washed-up actor. What is noticeable is a clear transition. Joong-ki seems less and less interested in meeting old expectations, and more focused on building something that makes sense for him as a man and an artist. This may alienate part of the audience that still expects another Descendants of the Sun, but it also opens space for a more solid, mature, and honest return. There is an evident trend of choosing characters that are denser, more human, and less idealized. Roles that do not depend solely on charisma or looks, but on presence, silence, and emotional complexity. This type of path is usually risky in the short term, but extremely rewarding in the long term, especially for actors who desire longevity and artistic respect. Another important point is time. Unlike in the past, Joong-ki no longer seems to be in a rush. He can afford the luxury of choosing better, making fewer mistakes, and appearing only when there is something truly relevant to show. In an industry saturated by constant releases, this strategic absence can, paradoxically, work in his favor. 2026 may also mark a silent reconciliation with the public, not through grand speeches or attempts to please everyone, but through consistency. A good project, then another. No exaggerations, no grandiose promises, just delivering stories that make sense for the current phase of his life. Perhaps Joong-ki will never occupy exactly the same spot he held at his peak, and that's okay. Few artists manage to repeat a peak of that magnitude, but that doesn't mean failure. It means transformation. His career now seems to be moving less toward immediate impact and more toward building something lasting. In the end, Joong-ki isn't canceled, he isn't finished, and he certainly hasn't disappeared. He is going through something that many idols face, but few manage to cross with dignity, the moment when the fantasy ends and reality begins.